We took on a big 9-house development. We made absolutely no money 7 days a week. It took all my energy. What that job did teach us is we got a whole lot of systems because we got to build pretty much the same house 9 times in a year.
What is success to you?
I think it was a learn to love it experience.
And there's always pitfalls that you can fall in, but then you've got no one else to blame but yourself.
Number one thing if you're struggling is to catch up with people about it.
Hey guys, before we kick off this episode, I just want to thank our content partners. You guys know it, Abodo, for supporting the Better Builder podcast. Now, I've actually firsthand heard from a lot of builders who love working with Abodo timbers. Over the last 20 years, they've perfected the art of thermally modifying New Zealand radiata. Now, that just means there's no chemicals on there. They pretty much just use steam and heat to modify the timber. So what does that mean? It's great on the tools, it's super light, it's durable and stable, which we know helps deliver a great end result for your clients. Good job, Abodo. Now, let's get this episode rolling. Anthony, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Cheers, mate. Nice to be here.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you on. I've been watching you, obviously, like I mentioned earlier off air, following you from a distance just because, you know, when I was involved in my own building business a while ago, I was always thinking of like, how can I be different? How can I position the company different? How can I have like an edge? Like, is there some sort of like niche that we could get into that's a bit separate to everyone else? Because otherwise you're just like another builder, either doing new builds or renovations or whatever, or even in the commercial space, just like the same as the other guy. And then they choose you on price, and that's not what you want, right? No. And then you guys, you're always kind of dabbling, and not dabbling, but like fully getting into different niches. So thanks for coming on.
Cheers, mate.
Tell me a little bit about how you got into the game. You know, did you always wanted to be a builder?
Yeah, I wasn't good at school, firstly. I had the ADHD, bit of dyslexia, so I found school real hard, but sport's quite easy, that normal thing that we either have one or the other. Yeah. But my old man always said I could always cut or find half of something. So I cutting a piece of wood, whatever it might be. And so I went down aluminium joinery for a good couple of years, putting aluminium into high-rise buildings. Cool. For my brother-in-law at that time. So that taught me like measurements had to be full-on accurate, and then I saw myself not really growing there. So I moved on from there, and one of my friends was doing his building apprenticeship, doing really cool renovations around like St. Luke's and on villas and bungalows and things like that. Cool. So that was really cool. He was really small then as well, so we had a lot of opportunity to learn and grow. But being a typical sort of kid, I still partied lots and that. But I met my partner, now wife, quite young, just after school. So she went down the route of being a chartered accountant. So she didn't have much money. I was the building apprentice. So we partied and worked really, really hard. And then grew up a bit over that time and got qualified. But just before then, the company I was working for skyrocketed, had to clear over $1 million a year before they sort of made profit and that sort of thing.
Wow. And
I was quite worried about that, but went on my honeymoon and ticked everything up on the old visa and came back, and the guy that was the project manager there said, "Didn't you know we're getting liquidated at the moment?" So I chose to, because I just got qualified before the honeymoon, to go out on my own. So I started building decks and fences and landscaping projects, and getting my wife to do all the pretty quoting. Like I draw it up on an A4 piece of paper. She'd check the spelling, the numbers, put it on a computer, and then flick it away, and then I'd hope that I'd get it. And did that for quite a while, and then got into like small renovations and stuff. And there was good money in it. And because we were small, like I only had two guys at that stage. Then we started getting into labour-only contracts too, for big group home builders and building companies. And some of them were good. Some of them you wouldn't make any money. So that taught us that we have to be a little bit more picky on what we do. And having a wife that's an accountant, that helped with the numbers.
Yeah.
So then fast forwarding from that, I got into doing really big renovations and the odd new build, but not having anything to do with the plans or anything like that. Then we found Formance, which is
Formance
structurally,
is like SIP panels?
SIP panel company. There's a few of them around. I've stuck pretty loyal to them because they've looked after me and I look after them. And yeah, so I still had a bit of an ego back then, but 7 years ago, and we took on a big 9-house development using SIPs. Nothing to do with the SIPs or the design or anything, but we made absolutely no money. For a year, we had to do this build, but 7 days a week, I was in there. Like it took all my energy.
Like you on the tools with the boys?
Yeah, on the tools some of the time, back into the office to see the numbers not doing well at all. We had a few other projects going, so, we could just, we're just doing all right. But what that job did teach us is the panels, and we're not having to buzz frames, and we got a whole lot of systems because we got to build pretty much the same house 9 times in a year. So we got way faster. We turned it into almost like a factory process. Like we had a few people standing the frames. We had another one nailing it off and foaming, and one really onto it person reading the plans. So we learned that, like we went backwards good few $100,000 on that one, but I always took the lessons from it, and knew that if we can get more involved with architects and the homeowner from the start, this whole process can be a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to get into that. In terms of the SIPs themselves, I remember them. Read this book about the McDonald's company, Macca's.
Yeah.
And the McDonald's brothers, they built a system as well where like they didn't want any wasted movements in the kitchen, so they called it like the symphony of efficiency. And it reminds me of what you're talking about now, where like you kind of the way that you have to build on site has to be completely different, right, with SIP than if you were building traditionally.
Yes and no. Like you can build pretty much any house using SIPs, if it's designed right with the architect and the engineer.
So how is it different? Let's focus on that part.
How it's different in different way if we've got big cantilevers and we've got heaps of steel and we've got a lot of different materials being used, can make it quite hard because it is it's like Lego, it's got to all fit and it's all blocks. So you've got to make sure it fits and it fits the first time, because cutting them down and mucking around takes a lot of time and is quite messy. So it purely comes down to the steps that you take at the start,
So with SIPs, so the pre-construction phase, the way that you almost have to design the home around knowing the SIP measurements rather than...
So That's what a lot of people actually think. Like you've got to be in this module of 12, 2, 4,
Right,
and
yeah.
all of that. You actually don't.
Okay.
You can do like a kit set house, and then you've got no wastage. But now Formants have got the factory in Christchurch, and that we can make any house pretty much. And the beauty of it is we can crane them in at 6.5 meters long.
Wow.
So, and that's way faster. We know that they're plumb. We're not having to buzz them down. And if it's designed right, the scaffold and all of that stuff comes down faster. And yeah.
Do you think that that's the way the world's moving to in New Zealand? Like if we are having this conversation like 15 years from now, do you think there will be a much larger percentage of builders in New Zealand using this sort of system? And which way do you prefer now that you use SIP? I mean, I know when it's really high end and architectural, there's limitations and so on, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, 100%. They have to, because building is so expensive, and it's expensive in a way that all of our materials, not so much even the sub-trades. It comes down to, we live so far away to the rest of the world. How can we make it more cost effective? And the way to do that is material choices. What's this house going to be used for? All of that sort of things. So like metal cladding, like it needs to be used a lot more on higher up buildings, because scaffold costs a fortune. And there's products like Abodo, Luna Wood, and LMA timber. Like what I really liked about LMA timber was they're reclaimed. Like it's reclaimed from all the wharfs and the jetties over in Australia and turned into weatherboards. Like that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. And shout out Abodo as well.
Yeah,
Our content partner.
Mm.
Okay, so and I think that's a really clever way, just kind of like going into that, working with Formans, going into the SIP panel side of things, because I mean that's very related to being closer to passive home structure, right? So do you guys build passive, or
Yeah.
I see on your shirt there you
So
have high performance homes. How's that? Is that part of Kane or different?
It's both of us. We're Kane Build Group and High Performance Homes.
Yep.
So what we do first at Kane Build Group is we try to get the client, obviously, as early as we can before they've even got resource consent. And from that time, like 7 years ago to now, we've learned a whole lot of things. Like the client needs peace of mind from the start. Like we need owners to come to us when they're looking for an architect. So what we've done is we've got a mini show home. So we bring them in with all different types of claddings and things like that. We bring them in, we try to settle their nerves, and then start the process step by step without it costing a fortune at the start.
So when you say a mini show home, what does that look like?
So it's 6x3. It's constructed out of SIPs. We've got like lots of different claddings, maintenance wise. We've got new wall. We don't actually have any Abodo yet, but hopefully they can
come on, guys,
come on board.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's sort of showing them that there's more to being a builder. Like we can have fun in this game, and what we've got to do as builders, I've found, is we've got to sort of interview the client too. And over time, you sort of get the feels on people, and if they've been really tight in ways that it starts ringing alarm bells, because we're there a long time. So
yeah.
No,
that's super important, eh? Well, the first part is getting the client involved early in the process, or having the builder early in the process, rather, before the architect starts going nuts and putting their pretty designs together and get the client all hyped on their dream home. The budget's got to be in the equation there, and I guess that's where the builder can really come in and add a lot of value.
Oh, 100%. So what we do is we sort of rip off the Band-Aid pretty quick. We say, what's your dream budget pretty much, and what's the more realistic one, and then from there they've got something in their mind. Is it a 4-bedroom with a study, with a scullery, whatever it might be? And if you've been in the game long enough and you know what you're doing, you sort of can tally things up pretty quick. So we do that first, and if we believe that we're not wasting anyone's time, we'll itemize step by step. Like, what do we need? A surveyor. We need, geotech. Then we need a concept drawn. So we'll get our architect and our planners to put a price together. So we're not spending too much money at the start, but we're making sure that the buildology of it can be built for a budget.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've always found it crazy. I mean, we've had these conversations on the podcast before as well, but I always found it crazy how, if you talk to the New Zealand Institute of Architecture, or whatever they're called, their kind of guidelines in terms of how this process should run is all around the architect should be involved at the start, draw up the plans for the client, get all the consents and all that sort of stuff, and then by the time it's then at that point they go, or somewhat in that order, then go choose 3 builders, and then 3 builders present their quote, and then you pick the middle one or whatever, right? And it's and that's their recommendation, and it's just not the best outcome for the client to do it that way, right? Because
it's crazy how it's still like that. Like I find New Zealand, takes a long time to get that she'll be right attitude out of the way, and then we've also got the story, I never want to build again. So New Zealand's getting slightly better, and we are finding clients are coming to us before architects these days, but it hasn't always been like that. But what we ask of them is to be as involved as we can be to take the stress away from the client. So what we try to do is be the project manager for the client. So if a geotech report comes in, it comes to us. It doesn't go to the client, because they don't see them all the time, and it can go, oh my gosh, what am I looking at? We're having to go 4 meters, and I thought it was 1.5, and not getting to the bottom of it. So what we do is we come up with a solution before we go to the client to settle their nerves, even if it is going to cost slightly more money. If we've got the reason for it, and why it's been picked up, and it can also be quite a good thing that it has been brought up, it can make things better.
Yeah. And so like you say, it was probably at least been 7 years since you've kind of changed tack a little bit. But over the last, 7 years, obviously you've been around for much longer than that. But say over the last, half a dozen years, how have you changed your approach of how you present yourself to clients? Because, if you look at a client looking to build, they may see the architect as the professional consultant, and they may see the builder as the guy with the tool belt swinging the hammer. So how have you been able to present yourself to the client in a way that they start to see you as the consultant also?
It's being true to yourself, really. It's like I'm one of the lucky ones that I actually really enjoy what I do. So I try to get them into our space in Takapuna as quick as we can. But some people can't. They even live overseas or in the South Island, so we do a lot of Zooms. We try to make it as easy as we can, even with an architect that has been chosen before us. We'll jump in there, meet the architect, start looking at his plans, and give some free advice to know that we're not trying to look amazing to the owner. We're trying to help the architect, because we don't believe that detail there is going to work. Because what happens is you get your plans, right? And then you give it to your builder, and then your builder goes to price it, and it comes out a lot more than what the client anticipated. Because, no offense again to some architects, they don't have their finger on the pulse to what material costs.
Yeah.
So it's our duty to tell the client and the architect that, yes, we can use that cladding there for that, but how about we use this cladding over here because it's a south elevation and it doesn't need to be this expensive wood. It could even be metal or aluminium.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Clients, back to client, it's word of mouth and referral for us, and never giving up. Like, especially in this market that's sort of happening at the minute, we're sort of gone into doing quite cool renovations. Back to where we started from, which I quite like. There's a lot of moving parts involved in them, but we've been able to choose the architect and the engineer, and we're actually days ahead of our schedule. And we've done things like, how can we make it easier for the builder? Like, how about that? Like, no one really thinks about the builder, even when it comes to scaffolding.
Yeah.
Like, the amount of scaffolds I went up when I was fully on the tools, up ladders 3 stories high. Now we put staircases in.
Yeah.
Just because I know how hard it is to take one box of stuff up. We want the builders to do exactly what they're good at and come to work with a positive attitude. We've also done a shrink wrap, and we've done a retractable roof on it so we can get our steel beams in instead of trying to lug them from the driveway through the house and bump something. And, you know, like, it's making things easier for all of us.
Yeah. It makes the whole process probably more enjoyable as well, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what I've come to realize now, that's arguable, or someone can argue with me, but generally how someone meets you is how they tend to see you forever. So, for example, if you're like an apprentice on site, you come in, oh, that's Jono, the apprentice, right?
Yeah.
Now, you can get qualified and stuff, but if everyone is still there, like 5 years later, you still kind of Jono, the apprentice. That's still how they met you.
Yeah.
You came in, you were useless, and now you're better, but there's still that tinge of that on there. And I think that builders, a lot of times builders don't really understand that. So how the clients see them and get introduced to them the first time is really important. Don't you agree?
Oh, 100%. So, positive attitudes, man. Like, you've got to have it, even if you're faking it. Like, you've got to have a positive attitude, because if you come to work all negative, you're going to bring your other mates down. You're going to bring your plumbers down. You're going to, it's going to have that knock-on effect. So that's sort of like even that scaffold thing we were talking about. Yeah. That makes the builders a little bit more positive, that they're not having to lug up, 100 ladders.
Yeah.
And I think what's happened in the game is it's not as bad as it used to be. Like, you don't go and dig a hole for no reason anymore. Like, because my goal is to make it easier than how long it took us to have all these steps in place. So, like, the builders, if you want it, like, it's there. You've just got to, like, your tools, like that. Some apprentices and stuff, if you've got someone that's going to stick around and be any good, and you look at their tools, like, do they take pride in their tools, their vehicle, that sort of thing, because that's how you make money. Not like, oh, I've got to pay for a warrant. Yeah, you do, because that's how you make money, because you got to get to work.
Yeah.
And if you prove yourself to your boss, like, it shouldn't matter because not every apprentice is the same, like, you can't just go, well, that apprentice was on this amount and this other guy's on that. That other guy just wants it more.
Yeah.
And you should be given merit if you're getting out, getting after it.
So let's talk about your company structure a bit. So how many guys have you got? The classic question at the barbecue.
Yeah.
Oh, how many guys you got? How many guys have you got? What's the breakdown of qualified versus unqualified, and do you have office staff? What's the setup?
So, back quite a while ago, I had lots of builders, apprentices, hammer hands, all of that, and had to clear quite a lot of money a fortnight to do that. And with 20-something guys, 27 guys, there was a lot of money to clear, and you wean them out. They've got one of the kids is sick. One, I've had a messy breakup, or there's so many stories that you get. So you're down to about 20. But now what we've done is we've kept our chosen builders. We've also got now some really cool building companies that work for us.
Cool.
And they're into the high performance and just making sure it's better than what's getting built out there in some cases. So we've kept our builders low, found a great relationship with 2 different building companies, and we feed them our work, and then we've got project managers, an Eben lady. My wife works full time in there.
Cool.
And myself. So we've fully changed that.
It's interesting because a lot of the Australian builders I talk to, it's a bit more common there to subcontract. They may have like maybe a couple of qualified guys, and then maybe someone project managing, or like a site, or someone floating around or whatever. But they outsource a lot of the carpentry work and to other teams.
Yeah.
But in New Zealand, it's not that common. People tend to have their teams.
No, because what we felt is to stay with formants, like to do formants proud, we've got to know what we're doing, and that's not just formants; it's our architectural builds, because we've got to know the system. But what we do is we put all the steps in place. We get our contracts really, really early. Our builders are fully engaged, and they're going over our plans with our project managers. Our engineer, we're lucky enough that we built his house for him, so he does all of our engineering work. And that's the whole thing. We've got to all be part of. Like, we can't be like, you're the architect, you're the engineer, you're the builder, and then there's no communication, because that's where the blowouts come. That's why we're months over, and I never want to build again story comes out.
Yeah.
But it all comes back to following a whole lot of steps early on with the client. Now we can do fixed contracts. Like, there was a long period of time there that I wouldn't do fixed because we didn't have enough to do with the plans. Now that we do, we can fix price it, and the variations in them are really, really minor because we've already gone through everything.
Yeah.
The only variations should really be what we can't see.
And how many guys have you got? Did you mention how many?
So it ranges.
Yeah.
We normally try to stick with three projects going on at a time. So that would range us to about 15.
Yeah.
But yeah, our managing sides is 5 of us.
Cool.
Mm.
And what do you do on the day to day? What do you spend most of your time on?
Yeah, so my day-to-days are...
Playing golf and...
Yeah, and on a big boat and jet skiing and stuff, and playing heaps of golf. So I plan my days. I'm pretty structured. Like, I get up at the same time every morning.
What time do you get up?
I get up at 4:15.
Cheapest. What time do you go to bed?
Try to be in bed by about no later than 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
I do that because it gets me in the right place for the day, because my day sort of moves quite a bit and it changes. But my job now is finding the work, popping in for site visits as much as I can, and being a counsellor, being this guy that, we've got to pick people up so we all win.
Yeah. Brings the vibes.
So day to day is probably start with a run, do my admin stuff, go for a site visit, come back when everyone's in the office, do our every couple of days we'll do like an overall big mesh little conversation that we all talk about, and then go to site again if I have to, or just make phone calls, lots of phone calls.
And what are you doing at the moment to get more work? Is it just a lot of networking, talking to architects, talking to previous clients? What do you do? Do you do a lot of marketing? How do you get work?
So about a year ago, this was one of the scariest things for me, is to talk. I could talk when there's not a camera around, that was fine. But when it came to doing cameras, I listened to quite a few podcasts, and you've got to get your name out there. It used to be all about who you know, but it's a lot of I know him, and which is cool. What I'm doing is driving and making sure that everything's running on track. And is there a step that we missed that we could make better? Because there's no way that I'm perfect, but I make sure that I learn from something. Like, it could be really, really small, but it might not have had to have happened if we just followed something that we could put into our practice. Just makes our life a bit easier.
I know with my business that I run like a construction marketing business. It's been no different to me than a lot of young builders, where like the first, and it's one of those things, how you start is how you finish kind of thing, where I started it, we moved over to Australia. I had my first baby years ago now. And then I was like, I don't want to work for anyone. I just want to work for myself while I want to spend some time with the new baby, right? And so I'll start a business, and that business's job will be to pay for like the bread and the milk and like pay for the groceries and pay for our family. Yeah. And then for years that ended up just being what the business was kind of for, to pay my personal bills. And so it ended up being me, Brad, with a bunch of little helpers around, right? And then at some point, I just couldn't do it anymore, because you have to like constantly be in the business. If you go on holiday, things just go downhill, and then you come back, and if you're not selling, it's not growing and all that, right? So I had to transition between, okay, well, I need to separate myself from the business, and the business needs to be its own entity, and you have to start building some structure in there. At what sort of stage did you realize that? Because I know a lot of builders are in exactly that same spot, where they may even have like 10 guys working for them. Yeah. But the structure is just, it's no different to then when they had 2 or 3 guys, and there's no real systems in place or anything. And it's just a bit of a good, they may generate good revenue, maybe not the greatest profit, but it's just a bit of a shit show. Was there a time in your business when you realized that you need to also transition that a bit, and how did you sort of go about it?
Yeah, that's a big question. I was exactly that guy, 100% running mad, and it's only relatively recent that it's not so crazy. I say it so much, but it's down to those steps. Like, I'm glad that it was that crazy to now have like a system like Builder Trend. Like, if you can get your builders on it and your subbies, that takes heaps of time. But once they do, man, it's so much easier. And that took a lot of stress off Anna, my wife. So that means she's got more free time, because when it comes to getting all the invoices in like that, that's done. We can allocate time because we know that it's in the system of Builder Trend. And but I can't say I'm fully retired off the tools. I sort of jump on now and again for really unique stuff. Yeah. Like staircases and like screens and stuff like that. Just to have some fun with my old brain. And but back to timing for that, probably 2 years ago.
Yeah. And so what did you, I mean, and I don't expect you to be like perfectly all there. Like, no builders are quite there, unless they've been around for 30 years. But what are some of the first things you did? So obviously you mentioned Builder Trend that came in. to the business and was able to take a lot of that. Is there any other? So did you bring any other sort of systems in or play kind of playbooks around how to do certain parts or how you run your site or anything like that? Is there anything else that you've kind of brought in?
Get smarter people in that know your weaknesses, and like when it comes to even build a trend, like I'm probably the worst person on it, but the rest of the team's really good.
Yeah.
And project manager is just Simon. Shout out to him. He's a great project manager, and he's been in the game for 45 plus years, and he's built everything. It's so funny when you've been around that long. It's like, I want a helicopter that, and I've done that.
Yeah.
So it's people like that. Even our admin lady, like Lynette, she's amazing. Like she'll really good with making sure that all of our invoices are paid on time, or we're owed something and it hasn't come. And Anna, my wife, she's amazing in there.
So it's almost like when you hire. So for you, you've kind of hired well, in terms of people that are smarter than you in specific elements of the business. Because also, like, a lot of people will hire people and then just like want to train them up from the bottom up or whatever, but you don't really know everything, right?
I've done that, and a lot of people think the grass is way greener, out there, and I'm going to go and do this, and it looks so easy, but people don't really see the stress that you got to carry, like, like they may see us go on a holiday once in a while. But those people sort of get found out, you know what I mean? Like, we work really, really hard, and now, like, from all the years that we did to now, we're just getting like paid now. Like, we put in a lot of work and got those systems. Now we know what we're doing, so now we're getting paid, and we know what we're going to get paid on a job. We know this because we've had a job, not that long ago that was notorious for not doing that. And it put so much stress on my little family. And, we learned from that, got the steps out of it. And now I can do my job, and I can, sometimes take the kids to school, but I most of the time pick them up, which is, awesome.
That's pretty cool to be able to do that, right? So how old are your kids again? Did you mention before?
So I got 11-year-old, 8-year-old, and one on the way. Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah.
How's well, I'm going to talk about that in a sec, but let me first ask you, there's a lot of builders out there that, because I really want to know about that family side as well, because it is kind of hard as young guys, or, just younger guys, even older guys, like to navigate all of that, right? Get it right. Builders that you've seen out there that started companies, build up companies versus others, like some guys seem to do well, and other guys, and you can't always just judge from Instagram, right?
Yeah,
to be honest,
that's the thing.
But some guys legitimately do well, and some guys don't quite get there. What have you seen? What are some of the different unique attributes that these builders have that end up doing really well and running their businesses and making good money and having a good team and getting good clients, working with with the guys that don't?
Never give up. That is the biggest one. Like, that even gives me goosebumps. Like, you just never give up. Like, you've got to just know that it does get better. Like, you've got to, like that job 7 years ago, we knew we were going to make no money and go backwards, but having that belief and that dream that it's gonna get better, and do right by others is a big one. Like, down to your apprentice. Like, I don't treat my apprentices or anything like that like shit. Like, that's, I ask them how their day is, all the way up to this big flash architect or this owner that's that we're pitching for. I'm me, like, and I wouldn't change pretty much how hard it has been, because now I'm so driven for the next 10 years.
Yeah. Solved a lot of problems. You had to deal with a lot of stuff. What's the biggest hit you've taken on a project over the years?
Oh, it's probably, there's a couple actually. One I can't really go into too much detail, but that got messy. We did right, we won, but that doesn't mean that we get paid for absolutely everything. But the other ones, that development I was saying, I think there was 300,000-400,000 that we went backwards on that job.
Sure.
Yeah, and we had a couple of young kids, and
how did you handle that? How did you deal with that?
well, I got a really good wife, and especially my dad. He's a smart man, and he doesn't beat around the bush. Like he's like, well, there's no plan B. Like I don't have a plan B. My plan A is to do this building company the best I can, and make people like look at it like that's where I want to be, because I take big pride in Kane Build Group. Probably, think twice about naming your company your last name, because like when times get tough, there's no way I'm folding my last name. So
I can only imagine that. The one that you can't get into, I assume that was like a lawsuit.
yeah,
What did you learn, without getting into the detail, what did you learn from going through a lawsuit, lawyers, all that sort of stuff? Like, what did you take out of it that you now, that obviously now you're wiser? What did you learn?
Heaps. Wow. It's probably got not much to do with building. A few of them. It made, because being a husband and wife in the trade together, and also being a chartered accountant and know what when we've got money and when we don't, sticking in there, and I reckon that's like it's been amazing. Like if anything, it's made us even tighter. Getting that real cool connection with my old man. If I didn't have those two, it would have been way, way harder. And the other thing is, you can't take everyone's word. You've got to turn up. You've got to show up. The wool can be put over your eyes pretty easy. And yeah, like that's probably the biggest thing. And the alarm bells at the start, if it's all down to sense before we've even started the job, and you haven't had anything to do with the architect or the engineering on it, don't do it. Like they can find someone else. We're like builders. We're there. Some of our jobs are over a year long. So we're there a long time. So you've got to choose your jobs right, or have a little bit of a buffer in there, and be prepared if anything goes wrong. Put your boots on. Like you're never too big to dig. Get in there.
It's a very interesting time now. Like it's hard now because beggars can't be choosers, right? And so you have the scenarios where clients come to you and it's like whatever, right? Like a nice chunky build or renovation. And somehow there's like a somewhat of a red flag, and you're misaligned, but you need it. And it's,
oh man, oh yeah, that old. Oh, we can still do all right. We just might have to just no.
And it's reminiscent to me of a lot of friends I know and builders that I know that have worked for those, but have worked for those group home builders. And it seems to be that the group home builders, because they squeeze the builders so much, that they only ever find those builders are exactly in that position where the guys go just to keep the guys busy, just to get us through.
We did that for months.
I'm just going to go and don't need to give names or anything, but I'm going to go work for this group home builder and whack out a couple of homes for them as fast as we possibly can. And if we go really fast, we can maybe even make a little bit of money out of this. And then normally they don't, and they probably lose money out of it. So it's a very hard thing. It's easy to say when someone really needs it, but I guess the conclusion to that is like you just gotta be careful, right? Because you can find yourself in a way worse position than you were to start off with.
It's about putting the ego aside, eh? And also probably not being as nice, like getting like this is your livelihood, and so you've got to pick them. But if you need the work, you've got to also look at your team too and be like, well, can we help this guy out that's really just not passionate about the game, because it's cutthroat out there, eh? Like you've got to give it 100, which really calculates to 70 on a good day to a lot of people out there. So you've got to pros and cons it, I reckon, because we've done jobs that will keep the food on the table, but it won't do much more, and now I don't really need that anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy game sometimes, especially during those difficult times, right? Family. Now, I've thought about this a lot. I've got my business. Sometimes cash flow is tight or whatever. You got to pay your staff and payroll and all that. And people don't pay you in time, and all cash flow is always going to be a tricky one sometimes, right? Unless maybe your wife's a chartered accountant, they can do all that cash flow projections for you.
I'm in the same boat. Yeah.
So there's scenarios where I would not tell my wife of certain situations because I'm shielding her from the stress. How do you have your wife work in the business and be across all the numbers and everything, while at the same time being able to shield her from, on a personal note, being able to her not feel the stress of the business and the finances?
No one's asked me that one. That one's quite tough. Like you've got to. It's not your kid's responsibility, so you've got to man up. Like fully, there's been times that I haven't wanted to get out of my car or be this hero that my kids, need me to be. But you've also got to remember this shall get way better. So and doing that with the wife too is just go, we're in this, we've got to ride this, but this is, I'm a real positive outlook sort of guy, which can sort of almost be a problem sometimes too when someone just wants you to listen. But when it comes to business and home life, that is a real challenge. But it's been able to go, well, if we do 25% and we should be making 25% on a job, nothing less. Like we're doing jobs for 10, 15%. And then wondering why we're down, and then it only takes that one person there not to pay us, and we're inside our house and we're going, holy shit, like I've got to pay for that, and that. But I don't quite know how to answer that exactly right, but it's just knowing that you're going to be all right, and let your other half have that little bit of sorrow, but be picking her up at the same time, or him, whatever it might be.
It's I've always joked with my mates around business. It's like half half of it, you know, if you're out there trying to like drive the business forward or whatever, like half of it's going out there and selling to the clients why you're the best.
Big time.
And then the other half of your job is selling your wife on how everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, because she's more of a she needs to see it, and I got massive vision for what we can do as a building company and more. Like I'll quickly say, like, to people that are struggling at the minute and that are doing it, you know, like, it does get better, but I can even help some of these guys to show them some of the steps so it doesn't have to be as painful for them.
And that's why it really is important. I mean, we keep harping on about it, but it really is important. Just like reaching out to builders. I mean, obviously that people listen to this, builders on here, but even like people that are maybe a couple of steps ahead of where they are, just asking, like, if you just ask for advice, if you just pick someone's brain, if you go, I'm in this situation, or I'm getting sued, or whatever, right? Just being open to put your ego aside. You don't have to always pretend you know everything, and then just ask, you know. Just
leave the ego at the door, eh? Like, you can bring it back a little bit on your rugby or your football or whatever.
Yeah.
But the ego thing's got to go, and you've got to, like you're saying, 50% sales. Like, you've got to be out there, but you've also got to be a brand that you're proud of. Like, you can't sell the dream and then actually do a shit job. Like, New Zealand's too small for that, for one, and that's probably one of the biggest things that we've got is we've done right, you know, and that's why we stay busy, and we're always willing to go that extra mile for a client.
You've come to this point now. You've like run the business for more than well over a decade or whatever. Where you're at now, what you've learned, sitting here today, like, what is success to you now?
Success for me now is being able to spend as much time with my kids. Like, my kids are everything. I coach my son. He's now in Rosmini, just started this year, but I coached him for years and years in basketball and know all of his mates. And my daughter, she's, amazing. And that's probably the best cool thing is I can get up early and I can finish early enough. I may have to do a few hours later on, but I can be present most of the time. Like, seriously, it's the hardest thing being a business owner and leaving that at the door and playing football and trying to be that 100% present. And that's like one of my biggest things I work towards is trying to keep my mind right. Because we're not here for that long, eh? So
yeah, and the kids grow up so fast. It's like a real people say it all the time, but the kids grow up before you know it. They're out of there.
I'm gonna keep mine. No.
Yeah. I read the stats, like a sucky stat to really read, but it was something along the lines of when your kid's 12, you've spent something like I think it's like 65 or 70% of the time you'll ever spend with them.
Yeah,
and when
my wife brings that one up.
Yeah, and I think when they're 18, it like goes to like 85%. So when they're 18, you spend 85% of the time you'll ever spend with them. And I always kind of think of that because my eldest daughter is 6. So I was always like work that out. I'm like, wow, we're already on like 30%, probably 35% the time we'll ever spend together. And she's only a baby the other day. So it's definitely something I also try to think of constantly, you know.
And just staying like, not shutting them down. Like let them have a chat, and because you're right. Like, you don't have that much time with them, but they learn so much from you, man. They're like a complete sponge. So like, you've got to be real careful with the attitudes you bring home.
Yes.
Otherwise, they're going to go and do that to their partner, or or let someone treat them, in a mean way. So yeah, it's big being a parent. Hey, like it's a lot, but I reckon I grew up pretty fast, and now I get to go to that playground and I get to kick that ball, and I don't really care that much what people think about me. So I can act a clown, and it's cool.
That's awesome, eh? What sort of habits have you formed? Like you mentioned, you get up at 4:15. I assume you don't get up and watch a movie or anything like that. You obviously have other things to kind of
Yeah.
get yourself ready for the day. What sort of habits have you found that work really well to kind of get you in the right mindset? Because the thinking is, I'm actually a firm believer that it's that pretty much all our thoughts, unless it's practical, is not good for you. Like none, no thoughts thinking about the past or the future is really that good for you. So getting the mind right is really important. What sort of habits have you found that has been helpful to get you in the game and kind of like just let you operate at a level that you like, that you charge?
Yeah, so I get up quite early. I've got a ritual as I go to my petrol station just up the road on the way to work, and I get my coffee, and then I get to work and I put on a podcast. I'm real into some like real expanding your business and things like that, and doing right by others and stuff. So I listen to a podcast called Ed Milet most mornings, and then I go straight into my diary. I write a whole lot of stuff down, what I want to do that day, and then I think about even down to what I'm going to post that day, which site am I going to go to. And even if you're not even doing that much, it's getting up at that time that you can send that email, you can get it done, and you can think about it too. You don't have to send that email the night before when you might be a little bit heated. You can sleep on it, and you can have a stretch or whatever you want to do. Go for a run. I do quite a lot of running, which I do mainly just to keep my mind right. And then I get to work before most of even the builders get there, if that's watering a lemon tree or if it's, just checking in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that does something to your mind, when you get up that early before anyone else is up.
Yeah, it's cool. I go to sleep early enough though.
Yeah. I can imagine, eh? Yeah. So I guess for me, the other thing I always try to have a bit of a chat about is around when things do go wrong. You mentioned, you had those examples of like when shit properly hits the fan. How do you, what have you found? Is there any practical ways that you've been able to keep it together? Those feelings of like, it's 2 a.m. and you just wake up and you have this hot flush over your body and just anxiety is crippling. And what do you do to kind of snap out of that, or just anything like that you can share with us?
Don't sit in it. Sit in it for just enough time to make the next step. Don't look at the steps that you have to do, all of them in one day or a month. Just get up. It's like even cleaning your house, your garden. Like pick up that first leaf and just start getting into it. Like that's the biggest thing. And just know that your mind plays a hell of a lot of tricks on you and normally escalates it to way more dramatic than what it needs to be. And most of the time, someone's always been through it or been through worse, eh? Like, know that you're not the only person that has had tricky situations, like being sued and thinking that, like the world's going to fall down and you're going to sell your house and you're going to do all this stuff, where I was lucky that I had my old man just like, no, you've got this, but also saying you need to go out there hard, like not hard enough. Like he knew what I was going through, but you need to go and get more business. And if you start thinking about it, how can I get down that avenue? I want to be here. I want this number. I need this number to, to survive. And you manifest it and things like that. In the morning, a big thing is just have a stretch and manifest like this is where I want to be. This is where I am. And in a couple of weeks, I want to go to the mount, or have something, a little goal that just puts you towards moving. And for us, it was like just put in the work.
Yeah, I love that. It's like keeping it like what you're saying now. It's almost like if you can keep it practical, it really helps.
It's hard to do,
and
man.
It's hard.
Oh,
but I mean, I guess you can't really have an emotion unless it's first triggered by a thought.
Yeah.
And it's generally in the thought where things go wrong, and then that leads to an emotion. And before you know it, you're sitting with hot flushes and anxiety. But it all started with a bullshit thought, a split second just before that. And positive or negative thoughts, can lead to a lot of, a lot of emotions. And once you're in that, then you're just in a big soup of chaos, So I think keeping it practical is really good, which I think what you're saying is just sort of just what's that next logical step?
Just get after that first leaf. Just pick the first leaf up is what I always think about it. It's like, and you know how I always used to like go, do that email last because it's the hardest. Like smash that one early in the day, because then the rest of your day is way better. And like another one is like, you can have a bad moment or, a bad few hours, but you don't have to make it a bad day. Like you can try to find the good out of that day. Like I'm lucky I can pick my kids up. It's not like, I have to pick my kids up today. It's like wicked. Like it could have been, it could have been a different story.
100%. So what advice do you have? Young guys coming up, people that are behind you, people that are, early in the game, just starting 3 years, 4 years into their construction business. What advice do you have for them, and what advice do you wish people gave you when you were sort of like 3 years in?
What advice? The advice I would give is turn up those few minutes early. Like if you start at 7:30, start at 7:20, open the container or put out a lead, something like that. Little tiny stuff like that. The foreman on that site will go and talk to the project manager on that site. Then it will come to me, or I'll see it and I'll tell the project manager, and go straight to the person like, well done for being here, or like that's a big one. And you're just gonna have to go hard. Like you're gonna have to put in the work that other people haven't wanted to do, or be lucky at the start and have work just come to you, but know that you're gonna have to work some Saturdays at the start. You're not just gonna have this pick up the kids when you want and you're still gonna make all this money. Nah, you've got to build the relationship with that architect, that perhaps then you could either build a house for him or for someone he knows. Everything takes quite a lot of time, I've found. Like I can get up that time in the morning and go, this could happen like this, and then it takes a month. Like you've got to just go, well, it took longer than expected, but I got there eventually, and take your expectations away, but have a big goal, but set little goals. Like I want to get qualified, but how long do you want to get qualified in? Like I had to get qualified quite fast because I had a mortgage really young. So I had to get qualified. We were doing up a house. My wife was sleeping on a mattress on a concrete floor while I was doing it up after I worked. I also had a landscaping job, so I'd put floodlights out and landscape after working for an aluminium company. Like you've got to put in the work, which then you do right by others. Then you get referrals, and it goes on. Like, yeah.
Absolutely, and so much more satisfaction out of doing hard work and then achieving it rather
Yeah.
than taking
And I
a
heard it.
shortcut.
I didn't even hear it that long ago on a podcast. Like, you work that hard to get paid later. Like, and if I listened to that podcast even a year earlier, I wouldn't have got it. But it's so true. Like, you've got to put your uniform on. Like, if you've got a uniform, put it out the night before. Like, just put your uniform out. Like, you don't have to make this task that if you're in construction, all I do is go to work, come home. Like, you can still fit in a lot of stuff if you just put in a few little routine steps, you know?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Last question. Did you have fun?
Yeah, man. Yeah. All good.
Thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it, eh?
Cheers, buddy.
And,
Awesome.
I think a lot of guys would get a lot out of it. So, yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks,
Cheers.
bro. Awesome.